Well, hello, everybody. My name is Brian Kilcourse with RSR Research, and I'm glad to be here today with Steve Allen, and he's going to introduce himself shortly. Our topic is on the subject of direct to consumer, the considerations, things to think about, and what the future has for us. And we will talk about those things. And after Steve has a chance to say hi. So Steve, say hi to us.
Hi, everybody. Many thanks for taking the time to listen in on this hopefully interesting topic that Brian and I are going to discuss today. I'm actually the VP of Sales for Metapack across the MENA region, and I've been working with retailers now for around 25 years.
That's a good run, and you're seeing lots and lots of changes in today's world, aren't you?
Oh, we certainly are. We certainly are.
Well, I know because of our prep calls that this is an emerging world that retailers really need to understand, and brands need to really understand. There's some changes afoot that are potentially volcanic in their effect. So let's talk about it. Really, we're seeing the rise of direct to consumer in a number of ways in our research, and it really started innocently enough. It started with the quiet growth of e-commerce in the pre-COVID days. But COVID caused it to explode, and the volumes of those kinds of transactions went from somewhere less than 10% to somewhere close to 40% very, very quickly. The other thing, of course, that was happening, has been going on for some time, is that retailers were basically using an endless aisle strategy to be able to get to the inventories of their manufacturers and ship directly to the consumer from the manufacturer. And that has found favor because of a number of things. But fundamentally, what's going on, I think, is that consumers are reaching right into the brands to find the products they're looking for. And so it raises the question, why have a retailer? And I think that's where we're going to go today. But I'd love to get your thought on the growth of D2C. What do you see on your side of the business?
Well, Brian, you're absolutely right. The growth, and obviously we'll use the word COVID quite a bit, I would imagine, through this discussion, has just exponentially seen huge growth in shipments, growth in returns, which is something that we'll come on to a little later. And also, really, as you say, people want to deal now more with the manufacturer rather than the retailer. Because obviously with the lockdowns that went on, with the closing of stores, etc., people couldn't visit, they couldn't go to the retailer. So they tended then to go to the actual sites for particular items, be it clothing, be it electrical goods, and buy directly from those manufacturers that had set themselves up ready for a D2C environment. I think what we saw was this, as I say, explosion during 2020, which then followed on through 2021, obviously still with lockdowns being prevalent, where we saw it go from probably just in our world, a Metapack of shipments around 1 billion across the world to 1.8 billion, which is astonishing growth. And the big players were certainly seeing this growth themselves, the likes of ASOS, H&M, etc. And certainly from your side, Brian, I believe that you've seen this in the States as well with some of the major brands there.
Absolutely, we have. It's interesting. There's so many vectors that you could approach this from. One of them is the consumer path to purchase. We did a study. We've done two studies recently. One that asked retailers where they think consumers start their shopping journey. And then we asked consumers. We asked about 1,000 consumers. Retailers thought that consumers start their shopping journey in the digital space primarily, but they thought it started with either their own website or with Amazon. It turns out the consumers told us something very different. They start with Google. and This has a tendency to disintermediate the retailer because, of course, it's driven by SEO. Whoever spends the most to get their site on the top of the list ends up being the one gets picked most frequently, and that's a huge opportunity for the brands to contact directly with consumers and bypass the retailer completely. And the other thing that's interesting to approach from is the perspective that price and convenience are still the top two drivers of demand. And if you're playing at a price and convenience level, not adding more complex value to the equation, then of course you're going to go to the place that's going to have the least overhead and the fastest, if you will, path to satisfaction. And again, that could very well be the manufacturer. The question is, how do retailers even combat that? It's such a compelling value proposition.
Yeah, I mean, we work with some of the largest retailers and brands in the world. So, John Lewis is one of our biggest. Mm-hmm. And John Lewis, stock for so many different brands, it's unbelievable. Right. But they're now seeing that being eroded by the likes of Dyson, who have now decided to move, buy from us, don't buy from anywhere else because you won't get it from anywhere else. We will ship it, almost instantly. And they're setting up if you like, and I can't use this word too much, but a mini Amazon approach. We'll get it to you next day. We'll get it to you sometimes same day, right? Because they're building in this new mechanism inside their carrier management solution that will allow them to do that. So what they're trying to do, and we use the word Amazon so many times, that they're trying to mimic Amazon, because let's face it, Amazon have done pretty well.
They've done well.
They've got it right in a lot of countries. They're still struggling in some, but they've got it right in most countries now. And, it is the way forward. But I think what the brands are seeing is that their margins are being eroded by the likes of Amazon, as they are by the likes of the shops like John Lewis, Argos in the UK, certainly, Macy's in the US, Walmart in the US. That margin, they actually want that back now. And, this is where I think, we can see benefits being derived by the margin actually staying with the manufacturer and then being given to the relevant customers who are being targeted by these organizations to continue buying from them directly.
That's fascinating. We were talking with a very large a sports shoe manufacturer who they were modernizing their forecasting capabilities, and they learned that they needed to forecast how much of their business was going to be D2C, because they didn't want to throw those shoes or whatever they're having, the sportswear, into the supply chain, and all those added costs and all those added times, and just if reserve a certain amount of inventory near the point of manufacture so they could ship it directly to the consumer. This person told me that even airlift or air freighting the shoes directly to the consumer was cheaper than sending it through their supply chain. You can see it. Good business for DHL, right?
Absolutely.
And when you add in all those problems that, at least in the United States, we're having in the port of Los Angeles, where ships couldn't get unloaded fast enough, you can see why this would be the desirable thing. Very undesirable for retailers, though. What has always stood in the way of that happening is that for manufacturers in particular, the smallest unit of demand is usually something pretty big, a case pack or a pallet or a container or something like that. They've never dealt with what I'd characterize as an atomic point of demand, which would be a customer demand. And for a long time, that was insurmountable. They didn't have CRM systems like retailers do. They couldn't connect to the consumer in a personal way that was relevant to the consumer in any meaningful way. So are they learning how to do that? Should retailers be concerned?
If we look at take Nike as an example, okay, yeah. Nike, have decided their infinite wisdom to actually move to a more D2C model. You only have to walk down Fifth Avenue now in New York to see the Nike Experience shop, right, where what they're trying to do is to actually say to their potential clients, come in, have a look, touch it, feel it. You don't buy it here, but we're going to show you the innovations, etc. Now, whether that slows that supply chain down, I don't know. We haven't actually managed to do any research with Nike yet to understand that. But I think what it does do, it puts out there a different way of shopping. And I think, you were absolutely right. The supply chain got battered towards the middle of last year and into the first part of this year, by stuff not being able to be shipped in. Transportation costs were going through the roof. You were paying $5,000 for a container at one point, then you were paying $20,000. Now, how do you absorb that? Well, what the retailers said was, we're not going to absorb that. So the brands were going, fine, we'll absorb that, but you're not going to sell our product anymore.
Because
you won't help us.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the unintended consequences of certain actions. So, for example, all those super ships couldn't get through the Panama Canal, so they're stuck on the west coast of the United States. These things just blow your mind when you start to think about, as I said, the unintended consequences. But you pointed to something kind of interesting. At least in the U.S., we call that showrooming, what Nike is doing, where you have an experienced showroom essentially, and you can guarantee that the product will get to the consumer in a couple of days. And I do see that there are some examples popping up that look very attractive. A couple of years ago, right before COVID, as a matter of fact, Nordstrom opened up an experience center for their fashion, so people could come in and try them on. Talk to the associate about what was best for them. They had a lot of hopes for this, and one of them they were trying to do is to limit the number of returns, to prevent customers from bracketing their purchases online. Now, that was not a big problem in 2019. It's a huge problem now.
Yeah.
And that's the other issue. So I guess what I would like to ask from your experience, are the brands any better at handling returns than the retailers are? The retailers are not very good at it.
No, and I think the problem is that, it's like you or I, we purchase something. We might purchase an Apple Mac, for instance, but we don't purchase it directly from Apple. We purchase it through a third party.
Right.
And what happens is, if that Mac doesn't work when you get it, or there are issues with it, where do you go? Do you go to Apple, or do you go to the retailer? Now, what has happened is that Apple have said, well, it's at the point where you purchase that item. They will deal with it first. So you're then dealing with an intermediary to try and sort something out. Now, if it needs returning, where do I return it? Do I return it to the shop if I can, which would be great for the shop, because potentially then you're getting extra footfall through the shop. So you're then getting extra potential sales through that shop. Or do I return it via a label, or do I return it via a portal? And one thing that we've found, especially in the fashion industry, is that people, and you use the word bracketing, and I find that fascinating, that people will buy multiple same items, but a different size and a different color, to make sure they get what they want. But then what they've got to do is return those. Let's say they buy 3, they've got to return 2 of those, right. Which means the onward cost then to the brand is the cost of returning that money, which they will be charged a certain percentage by the banks. So what we're seeing now is people that are offering exchanges are seeing a much lower returns rate as such, because people will just exchange an item. There is no money transaction going through. There are no calls to the call center from the customer saying, where is my money? And on the returns portals now, you can actually track that return properly. So I think, the brands are really learning quickly that the more tools as such that you give your purchasers means that there's less impact on call centers, less impact on the warehouse, and less impact on the inventory. And that's where we're really seeing now this what we would call the traditional value chain has disappeared, and now the new value chain is starting to appear more.
I think that's absolutely true. We actually are using the very similar language. We're calling it a value delivery ecosystem because it's not serial in nature. Demand can come from any place. Supply can come from any place. And it becomes if you will, a little bit of mathematics. Where's the best, most efficient way to fulfill any kind of an order, no matter where it came from? You just pointed to a potential future use case or a point of usefulness for retailers or for forward positioned inventory locations, and that is handling of returns. The problem is as bad as you say, and even worse, because the other thing you have to remember, or retailers need to remember, is that when you order 3 to keep 1, you have 2 pieces of inventory that you can't sell to somebody else.
Correct.
And so your service level, you have a choice, and it's a devil's choice. You either can risk lower service levels to other people who may want it, or you can over inventory. And I have yet to meet a retailer who wants to over inventory. So
Especially at the moment.
No, not at the moment. And with the cost of money going up, that's going to change even more.
Yeah.
So this is a huge challenge, but that creates an opportunity for the brand because the inventory is theirs. It's already there, rolls off the production line. You also mentioned something else about I'm going to use Nike as the example. I think of those locations as not only as a showroom, but it also is forward positioned inventory. Now, retailers are forward positioned inventory as well, but they have the retailer's overhead, the traditional overhead to maintain. And so our brands seeing this as an opportunity to have forward positioned inventory close to the point of demand and not have to accommodate a retailer's overhead and their need to make money?
Yeah, I mean, we saw this, when COVID started to kick in. A lot of the major brands were saying, right, we're going to turn our shops, our physical shops, into dark warehouses.
Right.
So what they were doing was setting up mini distribution centers, allowing a faster achievement of delivery to the customer, also reaching the customer as promised, which is a big thing for me. Delivery options on a website mean nothing unless you can meet those deliveries. Right. What they did, they set these dark warehouses up. They actually shipped stock into them and were allowed a certain amount of people during the lockdown to be in those areas to be able to ship goods out. And it worked really well. The fashion industry, especially in the UK, I'm not so sure about the US, but certainly in the UK, we saw a huge growth of dark warehouses. And it worked really well for a lot of the fashion brands to do this because it meant that stock that could be laying around for months, which was the spring stock, was then trying to be sold off very, very cheaply by those that didn't forward think from a brand perspective in the summer, which people didn't want. So, you've got this cyclical pattern of, especially in fashion, where you've got the spring, the summer, the autumn, and the winter. Each of those are 4 separate quarters that have to be looked at. And the forward-thinking ones got rid of that stock. And that was the most important thing.
It also strikes me that automation plays a key part of that. You mentioned fashion as a perfect example. Fashion has been item level tagging their garments for some time now. And the penetration of RFID, for example, is very high in fashion. That enables automation. And now the one thing that manufacturers really understand is automation. So retailers are coming to it, but manufacturers are already there.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're seeing is that brand manufacturers are moving away from using indirect channels. So, shipping their product to, for example, a Macy's or somebody like that. And instead, they're going to their own branded location for just the things you were talking about, showrooming their products, offering them directly to consumers that way. Do you see that as a trend that's likely to continue?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. We're seeing so many people now starting to prepare, if you like, for this to happen. The cost of inventory is just going through the roof. If you use a third-party logistics company, the cost can come down slightly, but you're still having to pay for warehousing space irrespective. So I think, what they're trying to do now is to cut out, if you like, those the Macy's, the Argoses of this world by saying, look, we don't need your expensive warehouse. We're going to centrally locate all of this and we're going to centrally ship all of this. And I can see, there is a big move. The likes of Adidas are moving towards a direct consumer model.
Yeah, Adidas is a good example. It's a perfect example.
Yeah. And it is an inevitability. I think not every brand will do it. Because at the end of the day, they may not have the cash reserves to be able to do it. They may not have the infrastructure to be able to do it. But certainly those that have forward thought already, and have looked at the way that they can get stock out quickly out of a single point warehouse just makes absolute sense.
So how do it's a tough question. I suppose we're prognosticating the future of the industry that I've spent my life in, but how do retailers mitigate against these kinds of risks? Is a closer partnership with the manufacturer the answer? If you can't beat them, join them type of a thing, or are those firewalls too high to get around?
It's a tough one, because at the end of the day, the retailers are completely, beholden to the pricing that the manufacturers give them.
Right. Exactly.
And, that there are certain rules, and, John Lewis used this rule an awful lot. If you can buy it cheaper, we'll match it. Now, that's a bold statement. It really is a very, very bold statement, because that means that they have got to have such a huge database of costing of each of the items that they sell on their shop floor and or through their website, that they actually match those prices. Now, we've seen a few occasions where they haven't managed to do it. And, that just sort of smacks of a retailer that has done a brilliant job in the past, not quite keeping up with trends moving forward. And I think the other big thing around all of this as well is that the shopper is becoming more canny. They're becoming, as you say, they'll go on to Google. They'll not necessarily buy the cheapest, because if the cheapest doesn't offer, for instance, and something, a question which you and I have discussed on numerous occasions, people want things now so that they're carbon neutral. So
that's another important consideration. Yes.
How is it being delivered to me? Is it being delivered in an electric van, or is it being delivered in some dirty old diesel van? And the whole world is changing now because they want this carbon neutrality. And the other thing, which is a great innovation, which some of some of our clients are using now, is a technology called What 3 Words, which means that it does get to the exact location, because What 3 Words allows you, it's split up into millions of square meters, and your particular address has a What 3 Words location. Metapack can build into their system a What 3 Words button that allows you to put that in, and it will deliver to your exact location within a few feet. And these sort of innovations now are making the manufacturers especially look up and go, we can build this in very quickly. We can be smarter than our retailers in doing so, cut the margins, make sure that we're using the best carriers that there are out there with the lowest carbon footprint, and build all this into where we want to move to.
That's brilliant. It reminds me of some data theory. And I was some years ago now, I remember listening to Hasso Plattner of SAP talk about the death of aggregations. And he said, as technology advances, and he was talking about the speed of computers and their storage capabilities and the speed of the network and all the rest of it, he said, you just don't need aggregations anymore. And he was speaking about databases, and I understand where he was coming from, but what is good for the goose is good for the gander. And what we're really talking about is the elimination of an aggregation in the value chain that we've been so used to for our entire lives. The retailer was the first level of demand aggregation. That was their job in the supply chain, and they shipped that aggregated demand up to the manufacturers that then respond, and they coordinate their manufacturing cycles. But in this day and age, you don't need an aggregation. If the manufacturer can get to the data, if it can get to the point of unitary demand, then the question is, okay, Mr. Retailer, what's your value? And it better be something other than price and convenience, because you will get beaten by that. So maybe it's the social content, maybe it's gathering together for events, maybe it's people love John Lewis, and want to go there because it's John Lewis. Exactly. But if you're competing on those bases, on the attributes of price and convenience and speed, you're going to get beat because the technology makes it possible.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I was speaking at an event about a month ago now around the impact of SEO and PPC across the board, and what does it actually mean? And are too many emails an inconvenience to me as the consumer.
Yeah.
I have a particular brand in the UK that I love. It's called Weirdfish. I bought from them. They do some really nice shirts and polo tops, etc. And they've got their marketing. I don't know how they've got it right, but they've just got it so perfect. You are pushed with an email, but you're not pestered with an email. And I think this is where some of the retailers have let themselves down very badly, because you either don't hear from them for months and months and months, or you are constantly bang, 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 bang. And one of the worst, and I'll name them because I'm not afraid to name and shame, is the Body Shop, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, great brand, great retailers, all their own staff, but too many emails. I know what I want from you guys, you know, and please don't keep bombarding me. And you unsubscribe, and somehow they manage to get you back, because you go into the shop, and as soon as you put your loyalty card through, there we go again. Here comes some more emails. And I think, you know, this is the other important point. You know, the retailers have got to listen to what the consumer wants. And I think sometimes they think the consumer wants everything they've got, and it's just too much.
It's just not true. Well, I'll tell a story, and I'll name the retailer too. Every day in my email, I get something from a company called Musician's Friend, which is a division of Guitar Center. I'm a musician. I've been a musician my whole life. And because I've been able to reach an age where I can afford pretty good stuff, I'm a snob. I'm terrible. And I get an email every morning from Musician's Friend that said, and it's entitled "Stupid Deal of the Day." And you know what? It's really a stupid deal. And there's no way on God's green earth that I'm ever going to buy what they're pitching. And they should know that. but they don't.
See, that's the thing. You know, we're talking about, you know, manufacturers getting it right. The manufacturer's got to get it right, you know, for what the consumer wants. You know, a Metapack, in the same way as your organization does a consumer confidence and consumer overview of what's happened in the previous year. And it's incredible the amount of people that will, when we put this out to the 10,000 people we put it out to, say, I am sick of receiving spam email. Right. Because that's how they perceive it. Even though it's not spam, because they've agreed to it, they see it as spam. And I think, you know, going this D2C route, okay, the manufacturers have got to get that spot on, because people will switch off very, very quickly.
So I'm hearing some to-dos for manufacturers, for the brands that are really important. First of all, they have a great opportunity to learn from retailers' mistakes, because retailers have been since Walmart, since the 1980s. Retailers that aren't Walmart have been trying to figure out other ways to compete. And of course, with the wide-scale adoption of smart mobile technology, consumers then grabbed all this power of information, and retailers have tried to use it to create more value around their brand, around their company's brand. But they've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and you just mentioned a big one. The other thing is that retailers now, because of Amazon primarily, have had to invest in things they're actually not very good at. They're not very good at direct-to-consumer delivery. They don't have huge fleets of rolling stock. They don't really know how to do transportation management. And in the last 2 years, they've had to learn how to do buy online, pick up in store order fulfillment for using store staffs that are not equipped. They're not trained. And retailers have no desire to pay to make them better equipped or better trained. So they're stuck in a tough position. Manufacturers can avoid all of that by just observing, first of all, and not making the same mistakes. And they have an opportunity. Their problem, I think, is going to continue to be that their understanding of what demand actually is different than a retailer's, and they need to learn that. And tying unitary demand to a manufacturing cycle is a big leap. There's a big difference in the speed in which those things work. But I think the opportunity is real. The question will then be, what do retailers? How can they protect themselves from this? And I suppose that's a discussion for another day.
No, absolutely. But I think the other thing is there, Brian. I mean, the big thing for me is I want to be able to track what's happening. When
Yeah.
I purchase something and I don't want to track it, I want to track it through the manufacturer's site. I don't want to track it through, UPS or DHL or DPD, because each of those tracking portals are very different in the way they work. And what we need to see is now, if you like, a uniform way of the actual manufacturers, and we'll include retailers for the moment because they're still around and they're still going to be around irrespective, to make sure that they have their own identifiable tracking portal that can be used, okay, rather than directing you to a third party, because you've then got an opportunity as a manufacturer or retailer to upsell to that person that is going onto your tracking portal to check where their item is. You don't have that with a DPD or a DHL or whatever it might be. You just don't have it because it just gives you the bland information that it's reached this point at 3:22 in the afternoon. I don't care. When am I going to get it? Okay. And can I buy something else? Because if I can't do that, that's not projecting the image that's needed for those particular retailers or manufacturers.
Well, this gets to the issue of who is responsible for customer satisfaction. And in today's, if you will, disintegrated world, it's a very tough question. So I'll pick on a couple of brands just for fun. I live in a very rural area in California in the mountains. And I'll get notifications from UPS that says your item has been delivered. Now, sometimes that's true. I just don't always know when. And I was thinking about the what three words, how valuable that would be to me. So if I walk the length of a football field, 300 yards, down to the road below my house, there's a very good chance I'm going to find my product in a ditch down there, because that's as close as the truck got to my property. That's not good. Now, who do I blame for that? Do I yell at the retailer? Do I yell at UPS? Do I yell at myself for being so stupid to have bought it that way? What are my alternatives? But ultimately, that's not the right approach. And we haven't even started to talk about returns yet. What if whatever was in the ditch was damaged? Then who do I yell at? Do I make a claim to UPS? Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've ever done that, but good luck with that.
Absolutely.
And or do I yell at the retailer? And who takes the hit? And it shouldn't be the consumer. So these are all issues that are very real. I do know one thing, and we saw this in the recession in 2008, and the adoption of the iPhone in particular very soon thereafter, is that once consumers have a new power in their hands, a new capability, they will never give it up.
Nope.
So retailers who think that consumers are going to flock back to the stores because the days of the pandemic seem to be behind us or going behind us, that's just not going to happen. And for retailers not to become an anachronism, they're going to have to redefine their value proposition. While they're busy doing that, manufacturers have a huge opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. And I think the thing is, we've seen the demographic change dramatically again because of the COVID pandemic. Our demographic in Europe used to be from sort of 18 to 38 was your typical online purchaser. Now it's 18 to 68 and higher, because people couldn't get to the shops. They weren't allowed in the shops. If you weren't going to buy a party dress because you couldn't go to a party unless you were our prime minister, but that's a different story. But the fact is that, we all were locked in, but we were locked into a world where we wanted other things. We wanted a new TV because our old one was getting on Earth. We wanted a new iPad. We wanted, and like you and I are musicians, I wanted a new trumpet. I couldn't go to the store and buy the trumpet. I had to have it delivered to my house, so it's a different world that we got used to, and it's not changing.
That's right.
We're not seeing that dip off that we and Metapack thought we might. It's just not changing. We've seen a 7% decrease in the first 3 months of this year. That's all in online trading. After
all the growth that you experienced the year before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's what we'd call an adjustment.
Exactly.
Yeah. And how many times have you heard people, or you've said it in your own lives, I can't believe that I ever used to do this. And I'm thinking about going to a store to get something. Back to being a musician, I've always thought that to order to pick in order to get the right instrument into my hands, I had to feel it.
Yep.
I had to feel I had to feel the craft of the maker. Turns out that that's not so true.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
And I laugh at myself at how much time I wasted wandering around looking for the right piece. Anyway, I think this is a tremendous conversation. I really appreciate having an opportunity to talk to you. Got to look up this what 3 words. This is this is something that we should all be well aware of. And of course, manufacturers have a lot to learn, and because they're human as well, they'll make mistakes. But they do have a model of what not to do, and that's what retailers have been trying to do for the last 25 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can concur with you completely. The fact is, we're going to move to a more D2C model as the manufacturers become more confident. And I think that's the word. Yeah. They've got to become confident that they can actually do this. Some of the big boys have already taken the plunge. And we've always had the pure play e-commerce, like the likes of ASOS and Boohoo, etc., in the UK, and more, with the likes of Zooplus. They are pure play, and they've always had to get it right from day one. But those that have relied on the retailers and now think to themselves, you know what, that 20%, I'd like that in my back pocket.
Why not? I mean, well, this gets down to the power of the profit and loss statement. When you think about a good retailer, for every, I'll think in dollars here because I'm American, but for every dollar you stick in the register, you spend around 70 cents on cost of goods.
Correct.
And with the other 30%, you get to pay for your business, pay your loans and your taxes, do all those other things. And you might get 2 or 3 pennies into your pocket at the end. It's very, very difficult business. Manufacturers have bigger margins. They have bigger gross margins because they're not paying for all that overhead that the retailer just had to cover. Now they'll take, let's just imagine, and if there's 30 cents after cost of goods and the cost of goods are relatively the same, then what can they reduce that by? Can they take half of that away? Well, they still have 15 pennies to play with. And they're still ahead. You can buy an awful lot of technology for those 15 pennies.
Absolutely.
And that's the opportunity. This has been a great conversation, Steve. It's good to see you again.
And you.
And I think I hear a couple more conversations for us. One is, how can retailers protect themselves? What should they do? And then I think we have a conversation about returns that we just touched on.
Yeah.
It's a big
It's a big one, that one. It's so big. It's untrue.
The elephant in the 40% elephant in the room, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
But
probably what we should do, we'll sit and chat again, and hopefully the audience will buy into what we're saying, and then we'll do a couple more of these, because I think it's a great way to, just, and I call it, and you've had this a number of times, shoot the breeze. And, it just gives 2 different mindsets, because obviously, I'm from the UK, you're from the US, similar markets, but very different.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, what do we say is that we're 2 people separated by a common language? Is that
exactly? So yeah, I very much look forward to doing another one of these, and hopefully, as I say, the audience that do get to listen to this will learn something from what we've got. And obviously, and I'll say this on behalf of Ioma, if there are questions that you've got, please reach out to either Brian or myself, because we're here to try and help you in an advisory capacity moving forward.
That's exactly right. And there's much more to talk about. This has been valuable. I've learned a tremendous amount just in our conversation today. So I think we have more mountains to climb, more problems to solve. So let's commit to doing that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
See you soon. All right. Bye-bye.